that is entitled Progress is Possible, Not Guaranteed. Finding Resilience for the Present by Remembering the Past. Written by Reverend Eileen Wiviott. Following her graduation from the Meadville Lombard Theological School, Reverend Eileen Wiviott was called as a senior minister at the Unitarian Church of Evanston in 2021. She also serves as the school chaplain for Meadville Lombard, and she is a trustee on the Interfaith Action of Evanston board. Sometimes being small is comforting. I feel that kind of smallness looking at the night sky, taking in the splendor of Jupiter, like a glittering diamond, larger and farther away than my mind can fathom. I felt that kind of smallness standing on the edge of the breathtaking Grand Canyon, the kind of smallness that puts my tiny life into perspective in comparison to the massiveness of all there is. I think of the power of creation, of all that has been and will be, and know that my problems, fears, and frustrations of the moment are nothing really. And sometimes small is just scary. Like Piglet said, it's hard to be brave when you're only a very small animal. Sometimes feeling small is so lonely. It feels like tightness and powerlessness. That kind of smallness is dispiriting. Friends, I felt that kind of smallness this week. Listening to the parade of lies and hate from our wannabe king, while elected leaders cheer on the abdication of responsibility, has left me feeling all but consumed with rage and despair. And in my smallness, amidst a nation unraveling, it can be helpful and an important act of resilience to look back at history, as Heather Cox Richardson does, to put things into some kind of reality check. It's helpful to read about those who have resisted terrible oppression from power-hungry and hateful leaders before. Even though every day seems to bring an unprecedented breach of public trust, it's oddly encouraging and fortifying to know we've moved through some pretty awful things before. Progress amidst struggle usually feels much too small and inconsequential, and yet it's the only way progress has ever been made. The only way tyrants have been brought down is through the cumulative and collective small gains made by individuals and communities building coalitions of justice and liberation over time. My sister-in-law, Jen, gave me a book for Christmas called The Small and the Mighty by Sharon McMahon. It's about ordinary, unsung Americans who had some significant part to play in the shaping of our country, a part perhaps bigger than their stature would predict. And several of the stories are about suffragists. Just a little more than 100 years ago, women, who made up half the population of this country, were not allowed to vote. Now, I recognize this is something that most of you already know, but it's important to remember the significance of the fact and how much has changed in a relatively short period of time. Thousands of women fought and died over 70 years for the basic right to cast a vote. Those decades of struggle were filled with individual stories of courage and conviction, of people with little to no political capital overcoming the odds to claim real power, the kind of power that can't be erased because it is spiritual, moral, and collective power, the power of the people. Many of us are feeling powerless right now amidst the seemingly unstoppable display of white male supremacy, fueled by disgusting amounts of money, greed, complicity, and willful ignorance. It's hard to find a sense of agency in the dizzying cruelty and unchecked aggression against vulnerable people. I am sick to my stomach, friends. And the only antidote to my heart and soul ache is to remember those who have come before and done incredible things to make life better for others, including those who won the right for women to vote in this country. They only achieved that victory because of the countless women before them who fought for decades and lost over and over again and kept marching. Yes, the world can be changed because we've done it before. So keep marching. Keep marching. Rebecca Brown Mitchell is one of those people who you may not have heard of. She fought for and won the right for women to vote in Idaho in 1896. Before doing so, she moved from our state, Illinois, after her husband died. Illinois was one of many coverture law states, which meant a woman was legally covered by her husband. When he died, everything they owned together was no longer hers. Everything she and her children had, clothes, chairs, dishes, was taken by the state. If she wanted it back, she would have had to pay the state for it. So, Rebecca left her home with nothing but her teenage daughter and traveled west to Idaho, where she opened a school in an abandoned shed with no resources and eventually turned her energies toward advancing rights for women and girls in her adopted state. The movement marched on state by state and inspired women like Maria de Lopez, the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, who encouraged votes for women in Spanish in California before she became a doctor and ambulance driver in World War I, something she had to pay her own way to do. The movement carried on with women like Inez Milholland, who joined the struggle for suffrage in 1913. The day before the inauguration of Woodrow Wilson, she famously rode her white horse, Gray Dawn, in a parade, draped in a billowing cape and bedecked in symbols of hope, mercy, and knowledge, down Pennsylvania Avenue, a parade which was to end in a dramatic tableau to inspire the crowds to support suffrage. Instead, it ended with Inez Milholland and others surrounded by heckling and violent men, the police refusing to step in. Milholland stayed in the suffrage fight for another 6 years, speaking passionately to large crowds despite her growing illness. She finally collapsed while traveling by train and died at the age of 30, just after Wilson won his second term as president and before the fight for national suffrage was won. Surely you've heard your own stories of lesser-known heroes, the small and the mighty who did incredible things, fought insurmountable odds, never as singular stories, but as a movement that grows as it marches and chips away, undeterred by the overwhelming forces of unchecked power. When I think of the small and the mighty, I can't help but think of Ruby Bridges. She wasn't listed in the book I read, probably because her story is not unsung. She's a hero to anyone who's seen this image. This small 6-year-old child, going to school flanked by federal marshals, struck fear in the hearts of people filled with venomous hate and bigotry, who threw things at her, then followed her into school to pull their own white children out so they wouldn't have to attend with this terrifying powerhouse. For a whole year, Ruby was the only student in the class with her teacher, Barbara Henry, a white woman from Boston who came to teach only her. In fact, Ruby didn't understand that she was the target of hate. She just wanted to go to school. She says now that her innocence protected her. She was small and mighty for sure, and so was Ms. Henry, who understood fully the danger and yet showed up every day to teach this child, to shield her from the hate around her with love. And how could I not mention the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, this week, 60 years ago, when those who had their power suppressed fought back by marching across the state of Alabama from Selma to Montgomery to demand their right to vote. Though they were beaten and deterred, they rose with courage and conviction to wrest power from the clutches of tyranny. Frederick Douglass taught us that power concedes nothing without a fight. It never has, and it never will. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't fight with fists or weapons. We fight with love to build collective power in beloved community, which is, as Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray describes it, community that enriches our lives, holds us in times of need, helps us to make a difference in the world, reminds us who we are, and encourages what is good and true in us and in humanity. Dear ones, I know how discouraging and dispiriting it all feels right now. I feel it too. And coalitions of change, islands of coherence, are made by our resistance, our willingness to keep moving forward, to not relinquish what we know is true and good and right in us and in humanity. Remember that there are millions working in community, collectively, creatively ideating a revolutionary way of being in the world every day. Teachers, therapists, doctors, nurses, and caregivers, librarians, social workers, U.S. aid workers, government employees just trying to ensure people have essential services, trans people having the courage to be who they are, disabled people who advocate for what they need to thrive and consequently make the world more accessible for everyone. Though we may feel powerless and frozen in our outrage, speaking the truth, writing the truth, engaging with others in the truth is a courageous and revolutionary act in these times. Listen to me. They want to tell you that it is better for you to be asleep. That is what anti-wokeness is. They want you to go to sleep after concussing you with a barrage of garbage. I'm telling you, as Rumi did, don't go back to sleep. Staying awake and aware, finding and sharing reliable sources of information, and refusing to fall for lies is an important act of resilience that can lead to us reclaiming our power. Showing up for those who are targeted is a way of resisting and helping all of us remain resilient. Holding on to joy, resting when you need to, being tender with your broken heart, and taking care of each other and those who are most vulnerable is what marching on looks like. There are small but mighty ways for us to coalesce and build our strength together. Commentator Robert Reich offered these ideas for what we can do. 1, protect decent and hardworking undocumented people in our community. 2, protect LGBTQ+ members of our community. 3, protect officials and election workers in our community being targeted. 4, participate in or organize boycotts. 5, fund groups like the ACLU that are leading the charge to litigate illegal seizures of power. 6, spread the truth, get news from reliable sources, and 7, to the extent possible, encourage those who you have any influence over to avoid propaganda outlets like Fox News, X, and to some extent, Facebook and Instagram. 8, push for progressive measures in your own local community. 9, encourage worker action and support unions. 10, keep the faith. Do not give up on America. Keeping the faith means taking care of our spirits, reaching out to each other when we feel small and alone. It means finding and sharing even the smallest sparks of joy, knowing that each spark can help ignite another to grow into a luminous flame. Friends, the gains will feel small and the losses too large, but we must keep marching. We must march as our ancestors did for us, and we must march for our descendants who need us to not give in to despair or give up on the power of community, the enduring legacy of goodness that has always and will always be a part of the human story. We must coalesce our small individual power into greater communal power, weaving stronger connections and broader islands of coherence. This fight is far from over. It is the struggle of the spirit of life to endure, to evolve, transform, and surprise us, even in our darkest hours. We will keep marching together in love, with justice and liberation as our guides. So please rise as you're willing and able once again for our last hymn, which is number 1020.